organize the screen. So welcome everybody. I'm David Meyers, the Executive Director of the Conservation Finance Alliance. And the CFA has been running the CFA Incubator for Innovation in Conservation Finance pretty much for the last year, and strangely coinciding with COVID, no relation. And we're really excited to be launching these. We're doing a series of webinars from some of the projects and companies that have been involved in the incubator, and we have, this is the, I believe, fourth presentation so far. If you've missed the presentations, they are available online, and you can go to the CFA's website to get access to them. Also, we have a CFA YouTube page that has the all the past presentations. So please don't hesitate to look into it. We're going to have a presentation today from Greenstand, and following the presentation, there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. And you should, if you have questions as we go forward, please write them down in the chat window. And then after the presentation, we can call on you. You can unmute yourself and ask the questions directly. And we're very much looking forward to some interesting discussion. This is a really important area. There's so much interest in restoration and tree planting these days. So we very much look forward to sharing what Greenstand has developed here. And without further ado, I'm passing it to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, for the intro. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. And I would like to present what Greenstand is all about and what we're up to. So let's start. We are an organization, a non-profit organization, and we're managing an open source community. As you can see, funded in 2015. We have a bunch of volunteers coming through and have already reached in a couple hundred of them. And basically, we have 30 active members that contribute monthly. And as you can see, about 2,000 or over 2,000 by now users in different countries covering pretty much the globe. We have a decentralized organizational setup, which really in the COVID time kind of helped us to really not feel anything of the changes that were happening around us. So we don't have a day office, and that I think really helped us. And I think it's also a new type of model that is coming up, on a new way of working, right? So what does it mean to be an open source community? Actually, I could elaborate on this for a while, but it basically, what it meant for us was a learning curve, and that is something that we have, was big part of the development, to be able to really work with the community and engage them and manage them in a way that you can really develop software, quality software. And that, yeah, that is definitely one of the main tasks that we have daily, is to organize that manpower, or that potential power. And we do that by using Slack, the usual tools like GitHub for the software development, and that is basically that's our daily workspace. In that we're quite comfortable with, and we have a bunch of other tools that we use, and that is basically that's like the organizational rundown. So we've become part of the uplink trillion tree cohort in September 2020, and we've also received some small grants during 2020, and they really helped us to bring the organization into the space that we're in now. Here, I just wanted to go through some UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our system is basically covering all of these. So we can get into those in detail, and if you have questions, but they're basically just to show that we're a multifaceted, impact-driven and impact-focusing project, which gets us to our model, basically. So what we really want to achieve is that we want to awaken the potential of natural restoration and regrowing forests by really involving all the possible players and all the possible people in this. So this is what we call the pay to grow model. We start with the impact capture, which is basically capturing and evaluating each tree's attributes. We'll get to this a little later in detail. But the idea is that we then have a direct link of this captured impact to to be able to compensate the steward. So here we're using the word steward or tree grower or farmer. I mean, this is just a language which will become a little bit clearer once we go through the presentation. And then a very important part of our model is that we monitor the impact. And we have built some tools that basically can monitor this proof of work. And with that, we basically prepare that impact to be ready for a market. And this is the next step where we look at the impact finance and the market of the impact, which is the impact proof can be based on the donors or traded openly. So what does that mean? We're able to basically capture the impact in a digital unit and then verify it, and then we can pass it on to the donor by trading it in our wallet system. So that enables us to have a direct access on both sides of the market. This is really now connecting the grower of the tree grower, with the donor. So these are the two outer sides of the market, and this is really what we're looking at bridging this connection. So why do we want to do that? Because we believe that this really will start to finance biodiversity and will really unlock the potential of a global initiative. And with this data, we can really expand these models and reach the whole globe and have effective biodiversity-based regeneration and reforestation. So let's move on to some screenshots out of our system. Here, basically what we can ask, is there a model to employ the urban population to regreen cities? And that's something Greenstand does. We have a project in Freetown, for example. This is data from Freetown. For those who would like to see patterns in these kind of plantings, these are kind of ravines. So this is the slope towards the left, it's high up, and then towards the right, it goes down into the city. And as you can see, most of the plantings here were done in like certain shapes and patterns, and that is obviously along these ravines. And this is part of a fairly big project, Freetown, the Tree Town, and the City Council of Freetown is basically has planted 250,000 trees during 2020. And we have tracked all of these trees, and they all have tree stewards, and they all have a very organized, there's a very organized structure in really reaching these communities and being able to have very pinpointed planting actions in the city. So that's a really cool model. We'll look at this a little bit in detail later. There's also the next question is basically focusing on a more rural system or model. This is a small screenshot, a sample of an area in Indonesia. You can see on the southern side is actually a palm nut plantation. You can see that very distinctive pattern, as we know, and then the top part is indigenous forest and rainforest. And as we know, this is one of the major issues in Asia, where you have basically the need for the palm nut oil, which is destroying the indigenous forests. So here in this case, there's been some reforestation on the edges of a river, and these are also tracked with a Greenstand system. So let's move on and explain a little bit what the stakeholders in the system are. So we're looking at the community members basically being the core of the system. They really need to shift their mindset, and that can happen if we are able to compensate them for their work. The next level of stakeholders is the tree growing organization, which does not actually always exist. So we have managed to go from the community members directly into our system, but in most cases, there is a tree growing organization in between, or some kind of level of organization. And then the next stakeholder is basically the donor or the consumer, or the larger organization that kind of usually sits somewhere in Europe or in the States, and has got the ability to engage with the individual donors, for example, and funnel and collect funds and then bring them to the planting organizations. And then what we also want to involve here as a strong stakeholder is obviously science and academia, because we believe that really good reforestation needs to be planned well, and science definitely needs to be heavily involved in making these ecological impact mappings, etc., etc. So that is basically the community. Now let's go quickly through the system. So we got, it all starts with an Android app, which is very easy to use, and it is really very functional. It only has a few screens, a few buttons, and a few functionalities. So the core idea is that we have a strong identification of the person, which is not too technical. So we work with a selfie, for example, instead of the usual kind of email authentication. And then you can go out in the field and track your trees. As you can see, the middle screen, let's say add a tree, and then basically take a picture of a tree, and then you end up with your trees to be uploaded, and you can upload them and synchronize them to the cloud. The whole app works offline until, which is really for the usual use case. This is very important because most people don't necessarily have any signal at all, usually in the field. So once they get back somewhere into reception and have a steady internet connection, then they can upload the data into the system, where it then goes into our admin panel. in the admin panel, we can then go through and filter and verify the trees. And we have a bunch of attributes that we can attach to the trees here. Obviously, the species is a very important, but we can also add additional tags. This really depends on the use case, depends on who is also verifying and what the data is supposed to be for. On the next step is basically then the web map and the wallet view. This is really the impact view that is seen by the donor. So this is also a very interesting piece in the puzzle, which is basically the outward. It's actually the most important part when it gets to communicating the impact and marketing it. So technical data flow, I'm just looking at the time a little bit. I don't know if we still have a good amount of time. So we got the app, we got the cloud verification program, and then we got the admin panel data analysis, and then basically it brings back a token. So the data, once it's verified, gets turned into a token and is then handled in our wallet system, which is then obviously the screen that I showed before. So let's look at some use cases. We have an improved traceability and transparency that is starting at the donor. Let's run through the usual cases. Donor gives money, organization plants tree or not. Organization says thank you, and that was it. And we basically have changed the system and have put in the transparency layer of this direct link to the grower, where we really see, okay, the impact is verified as a proof of work on the grower side, and Greenstand is creating a token and basically communicating that back to the eco-organization that can then put that back into the donor's hands and then or the investor's hands. So that is a classic use case. So use case one, as an example, is what we saw earlier in Indonesia. It's an eco investor and a Swedish eco marketing specialist. And then we have a very small tree planting team on the ground in Borneo, which is actually now managed by the eco marketing company in Sweden. So he has now the direct link to organize these planters and to really mobilize them, and then to also take that impact and then market it directly to his eco investor. So this is really a new way of being able to organize reforestation. So use case two, this is something that has come up through the Freetown project. Basically, we have a city council or an organization or a government structure, and then we have city tree stewards, and they are also then tracking the trees that they plant. The whole system, the whole Greenstand system is then used for the approval part and the wallet part. And the monitoring the database is also then used for the city council to monitor the tree stewards. The whole cycle here can also be then supporting possible carbon credit market claims. So that's something we are talking about with multiple partners. It is not an easy topic, so we're really this is something which will take a while, but we're working towards it, and we're very confident that the data that we provide and that we collect is a good base for that. So use case three, so this is the Freetown model, as I mentioned earlier. So in this case, the government subcontracts the CBOs. The CBOs then has their own tree stewards, and the CBO staff monitors the tree stewards. So basically, they go out and come back with a monthly tracking, and that basically helps the city council to monitor the CBO's contracts, because the CBOs have certain quotas and they have certain contracts, and therefore that helps the city council to monitor them. Then we have basically, again, the Greenstand system where the data goes in, and we have a very strong reporting back to the donor, who then finances the government, or in this case, the Freetown City Council. So that one. Yeah, and let's talk about the incubator. Before we started the incubator, Greenstand was loosely managed, I would say, or the structure was not really in place yet. Our business model and revenue streams were underdeveloped. Our meeting culture was fairly inconsistent. We did meet regular, but it was very often kind of project-based, and we didn't have these organized meetings. And then most of our, we're talking about a year ago now, this is beginning of 2020 roughly. So most of our software was in alpha state, and most of the software components were actually functional, but they were not integrated into a business model, and they were not really yet connected with each other. And we didn't have any large-scale projects that were executed by that time. So first exercise was the Canva model, the business model. So there, I don't want to run through all of this. This is going to be available, I guess, in the video as well. I think it's going to be time-wise a little tight. But yeah, we talked about revenue streams, cost structure, our key activities, our key partners, key resources. So we went through all the exercise of really looking, what are our customer relationships, the segments, the channels, etc. So this is something that David really helped us with to define this, and I think we spent quite some time to refine it and get it to this state. One of the other contributions or the parts of the discussion that David really pinned us down on was our tree value matrix, which is a very essential part of our system. Since we collect the impact data, but we really needed to put a value to it. And this is basically our first iteration of it, which is quite interesting because we're going to extend this one. This is our first iteration, and it basically just says, is the tree verified? So basically data quality, environmental quality, and the social quality of it. So we have a minimum of, you can basically have 0 points. This is a picture of a shoe. Let's say somebody takes a picture of a shoe or computer screen, which happens quite often. Obviously, then there is no impact. It becomes 0. Then when you take a picture of, let's say, an eucalyptus tree in a plantation, we can say, yes, it's a tree, it's verified. We can give it 1 point, but basically it already doesn't apply to the other 2 factors. Maybe the grower got compensated, then there is the chance that it gets another point. But the idea is here to really enforce or really promote indigenous species, social impact, and a real quality tree, and with a quality, transparent social impact. So this is something we're going to implement by the mid of 2021, and then we are planning to extend this to the version 2, which then, as you can see, it gets a bit more refined. We're talking about, yeah, is it a marketable product? Whatever is there? Is it growing seeds, food, fruit? Is there sustainable charcoal harvestable from it? Maybe sap or anything like that. And then we're looking also at carbon sequestration, which would obviously be another matrix within. But for now, in version 2, it will just basically be a +1 or a 0. So yeah, by the end of the incubator, we had a functioning business model. We had organized, we were much more organized in our meeting culture. We have now weekly check-ins with the different departments. We also have, yeah, different departments which we didn't have before. We have our organizational structure has been defined. We've defined some revenue streams. We've got our first paying customers. And we got about 10 large-scale conservation restoration projects that are interested in using the tree tracker and Greenstand to basically be used in their system for their monitoring and evaluation. We also have the roadmap for the tree value matrix, as you saw earlier, and we got our organizational structure in place. We got also we got really grip on how to manage the open source community and to engage with our volunteers. And this is something that we are very proud of, that we really give the community members a space where they feel they can contribute to something that is meaningful, and that actually is not the usual type of development, whatever, one more algorithm that makes that pushes, consumer market a little bit forward or something like that. So rather than programming something like this, they can now program on a concept that is really able to change how we engage with conservation. So also our outreach team, which is basically, you could call it a sales team, is now also organized through HubSpot, and we're using some other tools as well to be more effective in our outreach. And here is our team. We have now actually an organizational structure in place, with different levels and different departments. So I'm not going to get into details. We're already 26 minutes into the presentation. I would like to thank you for listening, and we're open for questions.
Great, thank you, Sebastian. Really some great progress that's been made. As I mentioned before, please do put your questions into the chat, and we can then call on you to unmute your microphone and ask directly. I do want to point out that we do have another webinar coming up. I forgot to mention in the introduction, on Thursday at 10 a.m. This is a focus on investment in coral reefs for coastal protection, and that'll be with organization Blue Finance. But let's have a discussion now on some of these the opportunities that Greenstand and Digital Tree could provide. We have a question from Charles. If you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask the question directly.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Okay. So as I said in my question, I was just, it seems like most of the examples you provide are for projects in developed countries, but I see this being a very useful application for developed countries also. So is there any barrier to adoption in developed countries, or is that also part of your business model?
Yeah, it's definitely part of our business model. There's absolutely no barrier. We're looking actually at the moment at a project in Karachi, Pakistan, which is very urban. So I think we also have some trees popping up in the States and in different places. And yeah, it's really the link, the excitement starts when you understand that the link between this little sapling in the ground and the donor can be made and can be exchanged in different ways. There's gamification. There's all kinds of formats where this impact token can be traded and can be what that impact token can communicate. And this is, yeah, so it basically has no limits.
Great. And I have a second part to my question, but maybe we can open up before.
No, please go ahead, Charles.
Okay. So I was just wondering if there was a lot of competing applications in this space, or are you basically groundbreaking?
Well, there's some other players, but usually they're always missing one component. So we really provide a very basic system that really allows you to customize your project as well. So this is where the other systems usually are coming from a much more marketing driven and profit driven system. So they kind of squeeze you into a certain use case, and basically that basically is the restriction. And our system is very moldable, very customizable, and really I think there we are groundbreaking when it comes to that.
Great, very exciting. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great questions about how to use the system, both for verifying impact and verifying planting, but also trying to get money down to the planters in ways that are more efficient and effective than current systems. So it'd be great to explore that a bit. But let me call on Tim here. You have a question that you're sharing?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the presentation. I was interested because you mentioned the adoption of the approach by some large scale projects. So I was interested to know what is large scale in your context, and also how that affects using the tool, or what changes you'd need to make to the tool for it to work in the context of a large scale project.
Yeah, that's a good question. So large scale, we're looking at, let's say, 10 million trees upwards. I would say that's what we call large scale. There is a very exciting project in Zimbabwe that we're working on, which would have about 10 million trees. The one in Karachi I mentioned also potentially is in the many million trees. What we have to do to the system to accommodate that is, it's quite technical, I guess, that question, but yeah, it still needs to be scaled up. But we are already, our infrastructure is basically designed to scale. So we're really working on these cloud-based microservices, etc. And so scalability wise, we're confident that we can reach. So the aim is for this year to be able to cater for around in the 10 millions, and then maybe in 2-3 years we can do billions.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, did you have a follow-up question for that?
Well, I was interested in the question of areas rather than individual trees, and whether that's an issue.
That's something we're going to find out soon in terms of, in this case, the large scale project that we're looking at in Kenya, for example, is not a very densely forested area, for example. So you're not looking at the same amount of trees per acre or hectare that you would have in a let's say tropical rainforest context. So that's something we on a tropical rainforest, let's say covering the whole Amazon, I think our system would definitely not be able to do that yet. The idea is that it will be at some point, but yeah, this is, and if you look at that context.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. And now, Charles, you had a suggestion there. I'm going to maybe go back to you. This looks quite interesting.
Sorry if I'm hogging the conversation.
No, it's fine, quite fine. We're a small group here, so no worries.
Yeah, so I was just suggesting that you look into the Canadian government's recent plan to plant 2 billion trees over the next 10 years. So they just launched this plan. It's been a government commitment that has been waiting to hit the ground for the last couple of years. So my feeling is that they're kind of struggling implementing this. But if you're, I just think it would be a good idea to just go to them to market your application and see if there's an interest.
Thanks, Charles. That's a good idea. I will definitely look into that. The context of, let's say, this would be probably quite a bit of forestry trees, I guess. In Canada, there aren't, I don't know, there's a certain type of species. I mean, there's lots of conifers, obviously.
Yeah, my understanding is that this would be, so this is a part of a plan to fight climate change. So it would have to be, it's not part of like regular forestry operations where you cut down the forest and then you plant them again, because that's, net zero impact on climate change. So that would be like reforestation, where probably more in like urban areas where there is like no trees growing and no plan to grow trees. And then this would be like basically new trees that would not exist without this commitment.
Yeah, no, I think there we would fit in very well. We can also then, the system can really be used to also then plan ahead and say, okay, this area, for example, would get a higher incentive for growing these types of trees, or this area would get, should have more of this species. So that's something where it can really be used for the planning as well. And then you could, involve unemployed people, for example, or somehow engage with the with your community there and make it fun and exciting to reforest as well.
Yeah, I think there's a really, really good fit with what the Canadian government is trying to achieve. Thank you.
Yeah, to me, that's what's so exciting about the product that you're developing here, is that everyone needs that verification to a certain extent. So so it's a really great great need out there. A couple more questions have come in, but let me call on Scott Lampman, who's had his hand raised a bit. Scott, to you, and then we'll go back to Martin and Jude.
Yeah, I claim being slow of mind here. I'm just trying to better understand the modeling. You know, I see one photo per tree and a single steward. You know, all of it sounds like maximum accountability. That's very attractive, but that also would equate to maximum transaction costs in the business model. So I'm just trying to figure out how Greenstand is compensated in the scheme. And also, you haven't addressed tree mortality. I mean, when the tree dies, how does the system address that?
Yeah, so on the compensation, we're looking at a 3% percentage that we get from the planter when it gets transferred to the organization, for example, in the form of a tree token. And then when the organization, let's say, has a monetary exchange for the impact tokens, that we get a 3% on that monetary value. So we have built that into our business model. And what happens if a tree dies? In most of the models that basically incentivize the tree growth, trees would be replaced. So if a tree grows, then basically the tree steward wouldn't get any money for that month or for that quarter or for that half year for that specific tree. So it would be in the interest of the tree steward to replace the tree and basically so that they can get the same amount of money, for example. And yes, it is maximum accountability.
And from what I understand, in terms of the transaction cost, which is again a question that I had early on, is that the level of effort of the tree planter to capture the tree is quite low. It's just taking a picture basically and filling out very basic information, right? So in theory, if the system itself is not too energy cumbersome or costs, to manage the servers and data, then in theory, you're able to keep those transaction costs quite low. Yeah,
absolutely. We're looking at currently 1,000 tree captures have about 100 megabyte storage. So that's not a whole lot, and we're optimizing it as well. So we could very well be at like something 50 megabyte or something for 1,000 tree captures, just to be very technical in this case. We don't see that as an issue. There's, data is a huge commodity, and it's a huge resource in the world. And I think we daily produce, giga terabytes, so that hasn't come up as an issue, and when we're looking at scale, and I don't think it will become one. I don't think we'll ever reach energy consumption like Bitcoin.
That's good. That's good. Let's go to Martin Romain.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thank you for the presentation. You basically answered that question, but I was just hoping to see if you think that the implementation of such a concept could be done in a place like the Marshall Island that has very remote communities with very limited access to the internet. So in this case, it would be applicable potentially in some of the urban centers, but probably not in very remote atolls. So yeah, do you think small places like the Marshall Islands that would potentially be replanting, I'd say maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of trees, but certainly not millions, would it be valuable, you think, for stewards and plant growers?
I think it would be very valuable in this case because, you're looking at, okay, first of all, as long as they can, let's say, go out trekking for a week, and then they can go back to the more urban centers where there is connection, and then they can upload the data, then basically you don't have any problem with using the system. The way I see it on smaller scale projects, this is actually a great use case because because you are able to really communicate this special, much more difficult, let's say, reforestation project. So the Marshall Islands, maybe it is very remote. There's maybe not much infrastructure. It's maybe very deforested over the last couple hundred years, etc. So the story that you can tell and the information you can attach to the impact is certainly very interesting and is also worth it for very small projects. So we have projects with like 500 trees, and often that is kind of the size that you know a private donation can really cover easily, and that is something where we find the strength that you can find these individual donors and connect them to small scale projects that maybe you in other ways wouldn't exist, because they it would be very hard to find funding and scale them up to the point where it would make sense to, let's say, have certain structures in place. So yeah, I'd encourage you to try it out.
Thanks for that. And if that's okay, I have two brief questions that relate to what you just mentioned now. One of it is, do you picture this concept contributing to pre or post-planting, meaning a donor would provide funding to implement planting exercises, or would contribute to already planted seedlings?
Yeah, this is a good question, because obviously it's kind of an after the fact in terms of, you know, the sapling is in the ground and the picture is taken. We do see the possibility, though, that you can use it for pre-finance. That is definitely possible. We haven't really built out that use case in detail yet, but this is something we have. It has come up, and we are super interested in it. And it is basically one of the it is a very important functionality that we need to develop. And one way would be, let's say you have the tree in the nursery already, and you start making a nursery inventory and then assigning it to people that then plant it, and you kind of have that into your put that into your finance model or something like that. It would really have to be designed, but yeah, we'll be happy to explore that with you.
Sounds good. And this is going to be my last question in regards to valuation, and you've already provided a lot of great insights on that. My question will here, the value of trees can be very variable depending on the species, depending on the location, but in particular in places like Marshall Island that has huge erosion issues, the value of a replanted coconut tree or any other vegetation that would be eventually reducing erosion impact would have a very high value. So would that be taken in consideration as you're developing your software? And the second question is in regards to how often this valuation would be done, if the steward is to submit a photo on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, so that the value of that tree eventually grows as it's able to capture more CO2 and potentially grow to an adult form that will eventually help reduce erosion.
Yeah, so this is also awesome question and super detailed already, because you're really looking at the nitty-gritty part of the value matrix now already. So yes, if there's soil erosion, has to be considered, water retention, soil building, and all these factors will be part of the value matrix, and they will become more specific. But the thing is also this: you can create these. The value matrix is just a guideline. So the way we just want to basically show these are the basics that we go through. But if you as a project can define those parameters yourself, and you can say, we know from research that whatever in this ravine, the erosion is very strong and we need to plant this type of tree, then that is a maximum high value tree for you in your context. And that's something you can then attach to the impact token yourself. I mean, this is where I was mentioning earlier, the system is very very flexible and very customizable, and it really should be a voice for you as a project to be able to say, hey, this is the impact that we've thought about this. These are the tree species we need. This is the impact we have, etc. So yeah, this is definitely definitely something that you could customize yourself.
Great. Let me pass it over to Jude if you're still on. Jude, you had a question that interests me very much as well.
Hi. Thanks, Sebastian and David. I love listening to what you're developing because of there's some work or some review I've been doing with Amazon and Microsoft and their interest now in nature-based solutions and how much the transparency and accountability is traceability is top of mind for them. So I was just wondering, could you share more about what kinds of what the process is like for the carbon credit markets or agreements that you've been working to develop? Is it going to the big corporates that are already looking at buying either buying credits or other investments, or you're working with the CBOs from scratch to start developing credits, or government entities? Just be wonderful to hear the approach you've been taking on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So it's very multifaceted at the moment. So one specific one we're looking at is in Kenya. There are these conservancies, and they have basically so the background of that is like the areas are actually private land, but they're leased to tour operators or to camp owners, and everybody has got their own part, like a bit of a concession. And so far it's been financed through park fees, etc., through tourism, and obviously with COVID, that has broken apart or fell apart. And now there's a much greater need for, let's say, claiming carbon credits. And this is where we come in as a data provider, basically, and a monitoring and evaluation system where we can then have projects with the association in this case, and we can collect the data, and they then handle the carbon credit claims. So they then go to the gold standard or other certifiers, and then say, okay, this is our area, these are the details, this is the data we collected, and basically they are responsible for doing that. So who they market that to, I wouldn't know. On a larger scale, in terms of, let's say, if we do have the individual farmer to be able to contribute to carbon credits, it would be an open market. It would very much be on an open platform where everybody can buy.
Thanks. That's really interesting. It's just a remark more that you could certainly see folks like the big conservation NGOs of the world, the Nature Conservancies, Conservation International, especially the ones that are trying to secure corporate funding for nature-based offsets or credits, that your platform could be a real great tool for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in discussion with some of them. Yeah, but definitely need to dive further into that.
Yeah, I'm also thinking there's, I mean, in addition to carbon, there may be other, well, first off, if you could figure out how to integrate carbon in, I think that would be just a huge win. But also, there may be other sort of development agencies that are looking to, let's say, encourage the revitalization of rubber plantations, or improved coffee varieties, and things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as just as restoration, but that have very
Precisely,
strong
yeah.
social impact that that donors may be willing to pay for. And also there's another model that it might be worth looking into, which is pay for success type approaches, pay for performance, where a donor might say, well, if you can plant 10,000 shea butter trees or something like that, shea oil trees, then we will pay you X amount. So you can verify that the planting has occurred, and that could be part of the system for pay for success type models. So that's also an area to explore.
Yeah.
We're running to the end of the session. I'm not sure if anyone else from Greenstand wants to just say a quick wrap up or comment before we thank everyone. So Sebastian, maybe, or Ezra, last words.
Yeah, I'll jump in here a little bit. One of the, thank you, David, for hosting us. And just a little background on the project, that the project has really been created to enable individuals at a small scale, so smallholder farmers with 5, 10, 30 trees, and enable them to participate in this global market of reforestation and carbon. And so with that, our approach to do it as a community has it's brought in all sorts of powerful people that really understand the space. And listening to the questions from today, you all understand this space, and our goal of doing it as a community is to create an underlying framework that can really enable a mass of people. And when we think of mass, we're thinking there's 1 billion smallholder farmers out there that are struggling to grow corn and other crops, and how do we engage them in this market, and what does that look like? And our approach has definitely been to create an open framework and underlying framework that can value the incremental growth of an individual tree and give that value to whoever's responsible for it in a way that they can transfer it and trade it. And so yeah, you're all welcome to join us in that journey. Thank you, David, for hosting and all your support. We've had an amazing time in your incubator. So you've pushed us along quite a lot. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks. And thanks, Sebastian, for a really great presentation. And thank you all for joining. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar on Thursday at 10. Otherwise, just we'll be in touch. And thanks very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Pleasure.